Welcome back to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Captain Michelle Rhone from Hampton Police Division. She has 23 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Captain Rhone. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. And, I think I shared this with you earlier, but I've done probably 150 interviews so far. And I think I've only had 5 females on the show. So I'm really excited to have you here and offer a different perspective and insights.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's not very many of us, but we're trying to get our numbers up. So
yeah, well, I will say that everyone who's been on the show so far has been amazing. And I think that's the beauty of this, is to have different perspectives and insights and walks of life. And I'm really excited to share your story, because we talked offline and you have a really incredible story. But I was hoping that maybe we can kind of go back in time and you can give us a little bit of background on you. How did you get started 23 years ago, and what has your career looked like so far?
Sure. So I come from a long line of firefighters, so it seemed really natural that I would choose to be in law enforcement. I grew up watching Murder, She Wrote and Matlock, and loved the mystery of it all and the excitement of it all, and went away to school, started my degree in communications, and then switched over to criminal justice, and actually started the police academy right after 9/11. So 9/11 happened. I was in college. I watched it on, my TV in my little apartment, and took my paperwork and joined the police department right away.
Wow.
And I've been here ever since. So I didn't hop around. We see a lot of candidates now that hop around to different agencies, but I just stayed. I stayed here, and I love it. I've worked everywhere in our agency but the schools. I don't always excel with other people's children. Mm-hmm. And I know that about myself. That's not my strong suit. So I've worked all over the place. I've been in the detective bureau, in our narcotics unit for a little while. I was our hiring manager, so I had a big HR function, which has served me well later in my career. And operations, a lot of times just patrol. I love this job, and patrol is truly what we all signed up to do initially. And I've always just had such a passion for police work and doing this job. I ran our training academy and our training division for 3 years, which encompassed our weapons range, so the firing range, and then the police academy and training for all of our employees, so our professional staff and our sworn staff members. And then I went back to patrol, and I got promoted to captain and never left. So here I am still in patrol, and I love it.
I love watching you, because I can tell just like how much you love this career by the way that you talk about it. Like, I can just see it on your face. Do you think that as a leader, because you've been through so many different roles within the organization, do you think that that is beneficial as a leader to have those different perspectives, to be able to maybe relate and empathize with the people within your organization?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. 100%. There are so many studies that show that the most successful leaders, and even the chiefs of police that end up there, have held a lot of different roles. So they've been in training, they've been in professional standards or internal affairs, they've been in investigations, because it does give you that perspective. So you have something to draw from when you're making decisions, and you're not just making decisions in a silo or in isolation because you've only had one experience, or at least primarily one throughout your career. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine that it also gives you credibility. People look at you and say, oh, she's done this. She understands what I'm going through, versus like, what do you know? Sure. That kind of mentality of like, well, you haven't walked a day in my shoes. And so it kind of gives you that credibility, I would imagine too.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so, at least.
So I know that wellness is really something that's important to you. And you started getting into this space when you were at the training academy, correct? Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little bit of insight in how that got started?
Sure. I had dipped my toe into the wellness waters. Before that, I was a sergeant. I worked in personnel, and I joined our CISM team, so our crisis intervention stress management. So I was a peer supporter, and I saw everyone else's stress and everyone else's sort of trauma, either on the job or off. and help them navigate it. But I was always a bit removed from it because it wasn't mine. Mm-hmm. And I had on the job challenges and trauma. I would assume they would call it that. But I didn't really understand it until I was at the academy. And I was at the academy, and it was right after 2020. So it was like January the 5th of 21. So we had all just navigated the worst of COVID. It was still going on, but it was, the worst of it was mostly over. And I got a call from my dad that my mom had been to the hospital the day before. She had a traumatic bleeding event, and she was still there. And then he didn't have much information, as most fathers don't in their 70s. And so we, a day later got a diagnosis that she had pancreatic cancer. They thought at first it was just like a tumor in her stomach, and they would remove it and that all would be well. But then it turned into this pancreatic cancer diagnosis. And so I Googled it because I have no days of medical school and didn't know what that meant. And I quickly learned it was a death sentence, that, 5%, I think, of people with pancreatic cancer live longer than 5 years. I mean, the numbers are not good at all. And hers was really advanced. So they had done further tests and learned that it had metastasized to her liver. And at that point, it's surely a death sentence. We're Christians, so, we knew that it was out of our hands to some extent, but the science behind it was not promising at all. And so we had this family conversation about what her life would look like while she was with us. And she really wanted to do the treatments, the most aggressive treatments that they had, to try and shrink it down, to try and buy some more time. And the doctor was very realistic with us in saying, it will extend your life. Like, it's probably not going to save your life, but it'll extend it and give you more time. Yeah. And I have a son, and she wanted time with her grandkid, and she wanted time with her family. But we were also still navigating COVID and getting recruits through. So I had this situation in life where I felt, and I think my sergeant actually had just been deployed. He at the time was in the reserves. So he had just been activated. And I was doing his job and my own job as a lieutenant in the academy. And I really felt like I was going to fail somewhere. It was either going to be professionally or at home. And failing my family, especially in that time, wasn't an option. Right. Picking your kid up late from school because you get tied up, that's a one-day momentary failure that you can overcome. But it was important for me to spend the time that she had left with her as well. I'm an only child, so there was a lot of care that was placed on me to help take care of her. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to do it without the support of the people that I worked with at the academy. Mm-hmm. And I had an incredible team of people. I'm not a very outwardly emotional person at work. I don't publicly cry. In fact, I don't really cry much at home. I'm like a shower crier. I go cry in private by myself. But they could really see the emotion on my face and how much I was struggling trying to navigate this disaster at home, explain it to my son, who was 6 years old at the time, and also come in and be an effective leader and be present for when they needed me, because they had needs too. Work couldn't just stop because I was having a personal crisis at home. Right. And I love every member of our CISM team, but it felt like there just wasn't a protocol on how to navigate this. There's protocols for every disaster and every emergency that we deal with, and we train for all of it. But there was nothing to tell me, all right, this is how you can lead this people and also show up for your family in a way that's meaningful, in a way that you'll remember, in a way that you'll be proud of once she's gone. And it was a really big struggle. And I had to share a lot of what I, was feeling and navigating, and especially on the hard days, with the people that I worked with. And I didn't want to call and say, I can't come in today because I have this other thing to do. It was important for me to show up, but I had to set that drive that I have and that, perfection mindset that I think a lot of law enforcement have. I had to set it aside and just say, like, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be painful. And if I don't at least share that I'm struggling with these folks, then they can't show up for me in a way that they find meaningful. And I knew how important it was to them to do that, because we all played an important role in the puzzle piece in running the academy and the training unit. And if you take one part out, it's obvious that there's a piece missing. And so I really relied upon them to fill in when I was missing and when I was absent, or when I had family medical leave to go take her to appointments or care for her. And they showed up, and they never complained about it, and they were happy to do it. And I realized that we all feel that way, I think, because we're caretakers of our community. We want to be caretakers for each other, but we don't allow each other the opportunity to do that very often, because we try and just stuff it down and pretend everything's okay. But they really leaned into the opportunity and showed up in the biggest way I could ever imagine.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And, I think so often, especially when it comes to wellness, we do talk a lot about on the job stressors and like, how can you manage that? And, what are the tools and resources when there's a critical incident, or, if you're working shift work, or like, what do we do? And so often we forget. And I think we talk about this a lot. We talk about how you are human, and we talk about humanizing the badge and all of these things. But then I don't think that there's as much focus on the other side of it. And so for you to tell your story of like, hey, like, I wanted to show up in the best way that I could at work, but I also had all of these really, really hard things going on in my life, and I didn't know how to navigate that. And when you talked to me offline, one of the lines that you said, and you kind of mentioned a little bit today too, is you're like, there's no manual for navigating, grief while also leading. And I would imagine that a lot of people listening to this can relate to that in one way or another, of like that push and pull of work life and home life, and how do you manage it all, and how can you be the most effective in both areas. And sometimes something does have to give a little bit, and I think unfortunately a lot of people do choose, and I've done this myself too, or I've chosen my career over my family. And some of my biggest regrets have been that, and it was during a time of losing a loved one where I thought that they couldn't survive without me, and so I made my choices, and for me, I don't think that they were the right choices. And so I really appreciate you saying like, it wasn't an option, although you wanted to be in both places at one time. There was the priority of your family that was more important at that time for you to be there, and you talked a lot about, leaning on your team. And I think a lot of people can relate to that too. It's like we isolate, and like you said, cry in private, and don't let people know that you're struggling, and posture up and keep going. But I really loved when you said you can't expect people to show up in the way that is meaningful for them if you don't express to them what's going on.
Yeah.
No one's going to know how to show up for you if you don't communicate those things. And so it's almost like a rewiring of ourselves to put ourselves out there and to say that. And my question for you is, because I know that you chose to be vulnerable in a way, to go to your team and say, hey, like, I'm hurting, I'm struggling. These are the things that I have going on. I need you to like help me out in this time, and to kind of fill that blank. How do you become someone that someone else can lean on too? Like how can you, one, have the courage and the vulnerability to lean on others, but then how can you also be that person that people feel comfortable and they trust to lean on in times when they're also struggling?
Yeah, you do it. You let them do it for you. So I think if you are the tough-nosed, hard person that never shows any vulnerability, then people aren't going to come to you when they feel vulnerable because it's not relatable. You're not relatable to them.
Right.
It's not that you're not human or they don't see you that way. It's just that we gravitate towards people who we know have been through similar experiences. And so when you show that you're navigating something hard, then when something hard happens to someone else, they can say, I remember that she went through that too, and I bet she can identify with me in this moment. And then they come to you automatically. It serves itself over and over again. And I never had to even ask them to show up. I just went to them and said, you will never believe the phone call that I got from my dad, and this is what's happened, and this is where we are. And how can we help you? Like, if you need time off, if you need a day, if you need us to take some of your responsibilities, just give it to us. I didn't even have to ask.
Yeah.
And they just were willing and showed up. And that's what we do as first responders, but we forget that we do that for the community, and we forget, I've got this, team of people that work here that are trained to do this, show up in the worst moments. And we do. I mean, that's when you see that the people you work with are your family.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, you hear it a lot. You see it like on LinkedIn or social media or whatever, where they talk about you guys being a family. And I think that if you're going to say that, then you have to trust that in the hardest times that people are going to show up, and that you guys are going to treat each other like family. But again, like we said before, I think we have to remind ourselves of those things, especially when you are so used to taking care of others and you're not maybe used to receiving that help or asking for help or, needing the help, so I think it's almost a little bit of like surrender.
Sure.
Little bit, like, okay, like I'm going to allow them to help me in this moment.
Yes. And you do have to set your pride aside because we are a prideful group of people, and especially the leadership in it, because we know that people are looking to us in emergencies to make sure that everyone can get through it safely. But this wasn't an emergency at work. This was, hey, we can't just leave our personal lives at home. And that was a really big, adage or teaching moment when I was coming up as a young officer. Even in the academy, they would say, leave your personal life at the door.
Yeah.
That's impossible. That's the worst advice that we could ever give somebody, because you can't do that. You cannot, there's no switch to turn it off. It doesn't stop existing because you're just operating out of a different space. That just teaches us to push it down and not recognize the pain that we feel outside of this job or even in this job. And, it's a shame that I had to experience something like this, I guess, to see it. But once you see it, you can't unsee it and you can't unfeel it. And it's a lesson that I have carried with me since. She passed away in 2022, and I still carry it with me. And there's officers that work with me and for me. They have family members and spouses that are battling cancer. And I'm the first one to say, whatever you need, like you need time off, go take the time off. This place will run without you. I promise. It's designed to run without us. It can run without the chief. So it should run without a captain or a patrol officer or a sergeant or a lieutenant. And it does. And we forget that sometimes.
Yeah. Do you think that the reverse is also true? Because we hear that, like, leave home life at home, but you also hear like leave work life at work. Do you think the opposite is also true, that there really isn't a switch either way, and that there is going to be like crossover? There is going to be like seepage, if you will, and that, you have to be able to communicate either with your family or with your team. And there's really not like a hard stop.
Yeah, we're whole people. I mean, That would be like asking us to split ourselves in half and never look at the other half again. It just doesn't work that way. One of the last really powerful conversations that I had with my mom when she was sick was about a person who had committed suicide on the phone while we were doing a negotiation. So I command our negotiations team, and at that time I wasn't the team commander, and we were on the phone with him, and he killed himself. And I remember talking to her about that. And I had just left that scene and gone to her house so that my dad could go bowling and I could stay with her. I couldn't just forget that that had happened. But she's my mom, and she wanted to show up in the same way that my team wanted to show up for me. She wanted to. Our families, our friends, I mean, they don't want to hear us complain about work all the time, but I don't want to hear my friends who work in the private sector complain about their jobs all the time either. At some point, you have to either make a decision to stay or go and do what's best for your life. But the people that care about us want to show up for us. They want to be there. They want to hear when things are hard. I think people like to feel needed in that way. You know, they want to know that their friends, family can count on them and that they lean on them for support. And this job requires such an incredible amount of support, both internally and at home, that I think, you know, as much as she was suffering, she was honored to do that because it probably took her mind off of some of her own pain for a little while.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you know, I think that everything you say, I just love. I think you're so well spoken, but I think that we do forget that people like want to be there for us. And again, it goes back to like that independent, like I've got it mentality. Mm-hmm. But I also like that you said that there's a fine line between getting things off your chest and effectively communicating, and then just like constantly complaining and being negative about something. And I think that we have to have a little bit of self-assessment sometimes of, you know, is this healthy, or is this something where I'm just like complaining to complain? And I think that we know the difference. You know, like we know when it's like, no, I really need to talk about this. Like, this is something that really impacted me, or this is something that's really like, you know, hard. And I need to, you know, be able to offload that so that I don't shove it down, because we know the result of shoving it down. You know, we know what that does to people. And I have experience with that too, you know, and how that completely blows up your life. And it is not recommended to do those things. So I know that you went through this incredibly hard time and you were at the training academy. What was the result of everything? Like, how did you get through everything? And what do you think you learned from that experience that you maybe then took with you to your agency as far as like wellness and developing? Because I know you said at that time there really wasn't anything, you know, you weren't really talking about this. So what was the aftermath of that?
I think I'm still in the aftermath. I don't know if you ever, I mean, you never get over a loss, right? You move forward with it, as Nora McInerney would say, like you move forward with the loss and with the grief. You don't just get over it. There's no magical day that you wait and then you wake up and it's gone. But I learned to navigate the new normal without my mom as part of my life. And it was LinkedIn. I took a picture of a tattoo I have on my arm where she wrote me a note when I was in high school, and it just says that she's proud of me and I love you. And I read it every day, and it makes me remember her and makes me feel good. And it can make me smile when I'm having a bad day. And I just wrote a post on LinkedIn, and I was astonished at the number of views and responses that I had, but just an outpouring of love and kindness from strangers. Again, people who didn't owe me anything in the world. They didn't know me from the next person they would pass on the street. And they just said, I love your story, or hang in there. I mean, it was amazing. Yeah. And I got a phone call from a woman who works for the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice. She works for Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police. And she said, you got to develop a class on this. I do a lot of teaching. It's my side hustle. So I'm an adjunct teacher at a university in Virginia, and I teach a lot of classes. And she said, you've got to teach people how you do this. And I thought, gosh, how do you teach others to be vulnerable? But that is really what it is you have to trust the vulnerability and the authenticity and the process of saying, I'm hurting at home. I'm not going to come in here a hot mess every day and not be able to function. It's not about that. It's just about saying, I'm having a bad day today, or I'm having a really hard morning. I'm hoping the day improves. I might be on edge a little bit. I'm going to do my best, or calling and saying, I've got to take care of these appointments. Can you fill in for me in this absence? So I put the class together and I taught it for the first time on my mom's birthday, actually, which was beautiful. Like I think I was more nervous than I ever have been teaching a class. I don't generally get stage fright or get nervous teaching. But I was nervous because I wanted her to be proud, and I wanted, her to see that I had taken the pain and tried to do something good with it. And so I taught it for the first time on her birthday this year, and it was for a women's leadership conference in Richmond, Virginia. And I think it was well received. There were a lot of head nods, which led me to believe and led me to understand that people go through this. I mean, we're not immune to life, where people die. Every single one of us die. Like, we all die someday. We'll have loss. We'll have the loss of a child, the loss of a pet, a parent. The first day of kindergarten is really hard for a lot of people, watching their kid go off to college, the empty nesters. We navigate all these really hard things in life. And then we come to work and it's like we expect one another to forget that that's even happening, but it's happening. And we just don't talk about it enough. And we don't talk about how you can be successful at both. You can navigate your personal crises that come along because life is filled with them. And you can also be good at this job. You don't have to be a leader, but you can be a good police officer, and you can, be a good manager or leader or whatever your role is within the agency. And you can show up for the people that love you at home too.
I really like that testament of it's not one or the other. Mm-hmm. You can be both. You can do both. And it's a matter of, like you said, being human and being able to communicate that and to understand that, like, I love when you said earlier, like, you can't cut yourself in half. You can't be two people. And if you can recognize that and realize that, I love how you said, and you like really had like an emphasis on that. You can do this, and two things can be true at once, Yes. And I try to think about that a lot, because sometimes I think we think in black or white, or we think in like definites. And I think two things can be true at once. You can't be struggling and be going through this thing, and you can also do a good job at something else, or you can show up for someone else at the same time. And sometimes we don't think that. We think it's one or the other. But I like that you emphasize, and it's not always one or the other, but it's also not always balanced. There's always going to be like a little bit of imbalance. Like, maybe there are times where you show up because you're going through something at home. Mm-hmm. You show up at work and you're like, maybe I'm going to be a little on edge. Maybe it's not a 50-50 right now. Maybe I'm not 100% here. Maybe I'm 80% here because mm-hmm. this other part is taking another percentage from me, and so giving yourself grace to be human and to understand that it's life. I also believe that our biggest challenges in life are our biggest opportunities to help other people. And during those times when you're going through the hardest times and moments of your life, you never feel that way, right? It's never like, yay, like now I get to help other people through the same thing. It feels so hard and heavy, and I'm like getting emotional about it because I know what it feels like to be like in that like darkest period of your life and asking yourself all those questions of like, why? And how am I going to get through this? And, what does the future look like? Like, I don't even know right now. And, just having that uncertainty. And then I think it's always in perspective, right? It's always like after and like during that like growth period or that healing process. And I love that you said it never just magically is okay. You have those forever seasons of like, okay, how do I navigate this new like normal in my life? But now, because you have gone through those things, like you said, now you have this opportunity to speak to that, right? And to relate to other people who are going through similar challenges. And I always tell people it's maybe not ever the exact same, right?
Sure.
And I think that that's okay. You know, you don't have to find someone that's gone through the exact same thing that you've been through, but to understand that someone went through something hard or something similar, and then be able to relate to each other and lean on each other and look to other people for inspiration, or sometimes you need them for like motivation to like keep going, you know? And so I think, in a way for me, I am grateful for that opportunity to be able to be that source for other people, you know, that are in their darkest times right now. And again, like it doesn't feel that way always, you know, it's, you never want to go through it, but sometimes I think that it's almost becomes a superpower, you know, to be able to help others after the fact.
Yeah, I think so. I think that it really increased my capacity for empathy and understanding, and just I take more of a pause now before I make any judgment on someone's attitude or their performance at work. I mean, and that's not to say that we don't have a standard for people, but if you see someone deviate from what you're used to from them, instead of jumping on them about a change in performance, usually I'll say, is something going on? What's wrong? Because a lot of times there's something else beneath the surface that we just don't know about. They're navigating something they haven't told anybody about, and it's impacting their ability to perform, or it's impacting their fuse, like how long they can put up with, you know, and tolerate things that they would normally be more tolerant of. And I think it's just shifted my perspective in that way, and just made me a lot more tolerant and a lot more empathetic as a person, to say, well, we don't know what other people are navigating. And so I'm not going to pass judgment on them in that way until I get some kind of understanding about what might be going on. And we see that a lot. You know, people gossip about each other's lives and their personal problems and whatnot around here. And every agency, I'm sure, is that way. But there's so much more beneath the surface that we just don't know about. And instead of taking the time to ask someone how they're doing, it's easier for us just to gossip about them. And that to me now is more intolerable than it was before. Yeah. And I'm much more tolerable of people who might have a shorter fuse or a quicker temper, because I just know that it's because of something else they have happening.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to, you know, trying to treat the cause rather than the symptom.
Sure.
And we see a lot of that, right? It's like you start to see, maybe unhealthy coping mechanisms for things. You start to see a change in performance, you know, maybe more sick time or whatever that is. Right. And I like to look at those things as symptoms, right? Those are symptoms to something deeper. And yes, we have like the picture of like the tree, right? It's like you see everything above the surface, and if something's thriving, you know, then usually like the roots are good and everything, but you start to see it die, and it's like, okay, well, where's the root cause of that? Like, sure, what's beneath the surface? And so I agree with you. I try to do that too, but not everyone's that way, you know, like,
sure, of course not.
Just asking that question of like, you know, what's going on? Is everything okay? What's the cause of this, not the symptom of it, and then trying to address that. Because you're right. I think that most people, especially if they're not that way, and then all of a sudden there's like a shift, then that's a really good indicator that there's something beneath the surface.
I agree 100%. I mean, if somebody looked at my sick time usage before my mom was sick, the amount of times I had my doors closed in my office, the amount of times that I was, you know, a little snappier or quicker to bite back. If somebody just looked at all of those things and didn't know what was going on, it was a shift in performance. Mm-hmm. The job was still getting done, but the performance was different. The way that it was done was definitely different. And so, you know, people did know what was going on because I told them, but I can just imagine the people that aren't as forthcoming and as open, because not everybody, like you said, not everybody feels that way. Not everybody trusts their leadership or their coworkers enough to share with them what's happening. And so I imagine there's a lot of that going on where we do see those changes and nobody ever takes the time to say, is everything okay? I've noticed a little difference in you. You're a little bit more on edge than you were before. Or you spend more time with your door closed. Is everything all right? Or I've heard you crying in your office. I mean, any of those things. It's easier for us just to walk out of the building or talk about it behind their back than it is to just say, I've noticed a bit of a change and I'm wondering if you're okay.
Yeah. I want to go back to the class that you taught. And the one thing I do want to say is I have full confidence that your mom was proud of you for teaching that class. And I know you said it's centered around vulnerability. Have you experienced, or do you have any insights that you can share about being a woman in law enforcement and being vulnerable? Do you think that there's unique challenges to that?
I do. I also believe in authenticity, and being who you are and showing up as who you are is what we want. Like, that's who we hired. And I teach our recruits that still is we don't want you to change who you are as a person to do this job. We want you to be who you are and learn how to shoot a gun and learn how to write a traffic ticket and work a traffic accident and interview people. But we don't want people to change. And we see a lot of people change, either who they are based on who the chief of police is or who their direct leader is or what squad they're on. And I think that the thing that's helped me the most is I've always just shown up as me. And I've not cared too much one way or the other if people liked it or not.
Yeah.
I think that that's been helpful, but I watch women particularly struggle because they're not sure whether to speak up in the meeting or whether to admit that they're having a bad day or feeling vulnerable, because we don't want that stereotypical label put on us.
Right.
I think just maybe over 23 years, I've just forced everyone to accept me, but I've always just sort of shown up as who I am. And I think that when you do that, you earn some credibility with the people that you work with. When you are authentically who you are all of the time, unapologetically, you earn credibility with that because you're consistent. You're not, how is she going to act when I tell her this news today? So it shows consistency and you earn some credibility. And, there are some people that are just more emotional than others, and that's okay. We just know that that's how they are. And then there's some that aren't, and that's okay too. I just needed to talk to the people about what I was feeling because I knew they were going to notice. And it felt like it would be more of an insult if I didn't share it than just opening up and telling them what was going on. Yeah. Because they're not fools, they're brilliant. And it would be ridiculous for me to think they wouldn't notice that something was different with me.
Right. I always grew up trying to be a version that I thought people would love. And I think that came from my upbringing. I had a very traumatic upbringing in childhood. And I was always like, well, maybe if I'm this way, then they'll love me and they'll stop doing the things that they're doing. And when that didn't work, I was like, oh, well, maybe if I'm this, maybe if I'm funnier, maybe if I'm more athletic, maybe if I'm, prettier, or maybe if I'm, and so I was always trying to conform to this idea that I thought that maybe my parents would love. And I think I took that with me through life. And it wasn't me trying to be disingenuous, but it was just me trying to figure out what made me, what gave me worth. What version of myself was worthy of love or acceptance. And that was really hard for me to navigate through my, childhood and young adult life. And I think as you get older, at least for me, like as I get older, it's not that I don't want people to like me. Like I think everyone to a certain extent wants people to like them. But I think to your point, like for me, it's so much more important to now live authentically me than it is for me to try to be a version that people are going to like. Because what I realized over time is no matter how many times you adapt or conform, it's like that chameleon, no matter how many times you do it, there are still people who are not going to like you. There are still people who don't think that you're worthy of their time or their respect or whatever, and so I was like, well, if like I would rather people not like me for me than to not like me for a version of me that I'm trying to be. And so I really like, and that's an exhale, right? Like that feels so freeing to be like, okay, well, this is me. And not that I'm not willing to evolve or grow or become a better version of myself, because I think that's what we all want. Over time, we want to like develop ourselves and, be better partners, parents, teammates, whatever it is. But I think that when you are like, you know what, like if that person doesn't like me for me, it doesn't hold as much weight anymore, as we get older. And so I really appreciated that you said that you're like, you know what, like vulnerability, but also authenticity are key.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, when I was I came here when I was 21.
Yeah.
And as a younger officer, I look back and it was like, keep your head down, try to fit in, it's a man's world, just do the work. And I did that, but not because I didn't speak out or speak up when I thought that something was wrong. But I took the assignments that I was one of the only women in the unit, or I was the only female in the unit. And I just learned to be comfortable in those spaces because I liked the job so much. So it became more about enjoying the job, and like the rest would follow. And it did. It truly did. I just showed up and went to work in places that I loved, and the rest of the chips just sort of fell in place. I think because people see the passion and the heart that you have for the work, and they see that you're at least trying. Like nobody expects perfection, but trying is important. We all appreciate effort from others. And so I think I just always tried hard, maybe, and that worked too. And I just enjoyed the job and had fun with the work that I was doing. And I think that people see that. They pay attention.
Yeah. I'm curious, what words of wisdom or like advice would you give to other leaders, maybe who are struggling with navigating home life and work life and like being able to lead others, maybe something that you wish you would have known during that time or something that you learned, during that time. What words of advice would you give to other leaders?
Find someone to talk to and lean on. It doesn't have to be someone in this job, but it should be somebody, because we all need someone to listen and someone to lean on and someone to call. And the more people you have that support you, the better off you'll be. And I know that there's the expression, it gets lonelier at the top. And that's true because, you don't want to complain down, they say, but really that only applies to the organization. I'm not going to complain down about problems that I see organizationally. I'm going to complain up. And as far as rank is concerned, that doesn't apply in our personal lives. It doesn't apply with navigating personal challenges. Like I could go talk to patrolmen and have a very meaningful, very supportive, very loving conversation. Some of the closest people to me that I trust the most in this organization are patrol officers. Rank has nothing to do with it. And so I think we forget that as leaders. Like we want the people that we lead to see us as strong and capable. But we forget that you can be strong and capable and navigate challenges in life and come in and say, I'm having a bad day today, or my mom or my child or my husband had a rough night last night. And I might carry a little of that over this morning. I might need a little extra coffee. Please be extra patient with me. But those conversations are important because that's what grounds all of us in our own humanity and lets everybody in the organization know that it's okay to be that way. If you see that done at the highest levels, it sets a culture throughout that it's acceptable to be human in this job. And I think that's really, really important. And I think we need that a lot, especially to retain newer officers that are coming into the agency that are more vulnerable than we were. Like they know how to do it. You know, we have to experience trauma to figure it out, but they showed up knowing how to be vulnerable. And I don't think that makes them bad. I think it kind of makes them better, honestly. We just have to support them and allow them to be that way because it's taken us years to get here, but they know how to do it already. So we just have to support them in that.
I love that you said it. I think it kind of makes them better. I like smiled about it because, you know, there's so much conversation right now about like the younger generation. And, you know, I think that from what I understand, every generation's been that way, you know, the new generation coming in and kind of having that judgment or, you know, compare and contrast. But what words of wisdom would you have for the younger generation? You know, maybe something you wish you would have known earlier in your career when you first started.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell them sort of the same thing as be authentically who you are, because the crusty old people that don't understand and are unwilling to change, they're going to retire. And those young people are going to outlast every single one of us. You know, I'm probably in at least the last decade. I mean, I maybe shorter than that of my time span left in this career. And 10 years, I'm sorry, is like so fast. It's the blink of an eye. And they just have to stick with it because we're all going to go away and they're going to be the ones running it. And then they can make the positive changes that they want. And I wish someone had said, like, just give it a couple years. Like, it'll get better. They'll go, you know, the leader that you hate today, they're transferred tomorrow. Just give it some time. I think they'll see a big shift, just like we have. We've made it the way that we wanted it to be because we saw problems in it then, and we're now making these changes. And it's the same for them.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it so much. And I was really looking forward to this because you do have such a powerful story. And I appreciate you sharing that and being vulnerable with me and everyone who's listening. And just thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Thanks for everything that you do for law enforcement. We need advocates and we need people who look out for us because we're bad at looking out for ourselves. And so I love that you take your time and you dedicate your life to do that for our profession. That's really noble and we're grateful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll stay in touch for sure.
Yes, let's do that.